Welcome to the Blotcher Show. My name is Chris. I'm your host, and you are listening to this week's episode of Storytime Friday. This week's story is titled The Fading Veil. The wind howled a mournful dirge across the misty moorland, a counterpoint to the frantic beating of Merwin's heart. 17 years she'd spent shielding her son, Cale, from the ravenous hunger of the Ember Court, a realm of incandescent beauty and terrifying power. 17 years of stolen moments, whispered lullabies, and the ever-present shadow of fear clinging to her like the clinging mist itself. Now, that shadow stretched, vast and menacing, threatening to engulf them both. Their cottage, nestled deep within the embrace of the moor, was a testament to her resilience. It wasn't much. Rough, hewn timber, a thatch roof patched countless times, a single hearth that fought a losing battle against the encroaching chill. But it was home. Or rather, it had been. The magic she'd woven around it, a shimmering protective veil drawn from the very essence of her being, was fraying, unraveling like a worn tapestry. The vibrant heather that usually carpeted the moor was sickly yellow, the air thick with a chilling premonition that spoke of something ancient and malevolent stirring. The veil between worlds was thinning. The Ember Court, a breathtaking realm of fire and shadow, was bleeding through. She could feel it in the wind, taste it in the air, the scent of burning ash and ozone, a phantom echo of the shimmering pyres that marked the court's terrifying rituals. Queen Cerithiel, a woman whose beauty was as lethal as her ambition, was coming. And she wouldn't stop until she claimed what she believed was rightfully hers. Cale. Merwin ran a trembling hand over the worn wood of her writing desk, her gaze falling upon a faded portrait of a young woman with fiery red hair, a woman who seemed both familiar and strangely distant. That woman was her. A lifetime ago, before betrayal and escape had etched lines of weariness onto her face, before the weight of her secrets had bowed her shoulders, before the love for her son had become the anchor of her existence. The Ember Court, it was a realm of impossible beauty, a tapestry woven from fire and shadow, ruled by beings of immense power. Beings who lived and breathed magic. She had once been one of them, a seer, gifted with the ability to glimpse the future. But that gift had come at a price she was still paying. Her gift had shown her the fate intended for Cale, a fate so horrific that she had defied her own people, her own queen, to save him. She had stolen him away, carrying him through the shimmering veil, escaping into the relative safety of the mortal world. She had hidden him, protected him, woven spells around him, sacrificing her own place in the Ember Court, her own power for his life. But now, the magic was failing. The veil was weakening, and the court's relentless pursuit was tightening its grip. The time for hiding was over. The unnatural chill intensified, a palpable weight pressing down on the cottage. Merwin felt a sharp pang in her chest, a mirroring of the pain that pulsed deep within her son, Kale. He was 17 now, a young man on the cusp of adulthood, unaware of the terrible destiny that awaited him. She'd kept the truth hidden from him, a shield against the cruel reality of his birth, a child of fire and fate, destined to be a vessel for the dying Ember King, a vessel to be consumed by the very magic that pulsed within his veins. He hadn't known about the Ember Court, about the whispers of the prophecy, about the fiery magic that throbbed beneath his skin. She'd shielded him as best she could, but the magic was failing, and the faintest tremors of the power he possessed were beginning to manifest. Recently, his dreams had become more vivid, filled with images of fiery landscapes, shadowy figures, and the echoing cries of pain. He'd woken up screaming from nightmares of towering flames and suffocating darkness. A few weeks ago, he'd accidentally ignited a fire in the hearth, a small flicker that had flared into a raging inferno before Merwin had managed to contain it. He'd been terrified, blaming himself, but a deep underlying thrill also vibrated through him. It was only then that she realized that the dormant ember magic within him was wakening. His heritage, long suppressed, was finally asserting itself. The whispers of prophecy were growing louder, echoing in her thoughts, weaving their way through the cracks of her carefully constructed reality. They spoke of a chosen name, or of a chosen one, of a powerful vessel, of a battle that would determine the fate of both worlds, a battle she knew she couldn't avoid. The wind picked up, whipping the mist into a frenzy, obscuring the moor in a swirling vortex of white. A cold breath of magic swept through the cottage, a tangible manifestation of the encroaching darkness. It was a warning, a prelude to the inevitable. The Ember Court was coming, not with a whisper, but with a roar. And this time, Mira knew. She wouldn't be able to protect Kale by hiding him. She had to prepare him, to teach him to fight, to control the terrifying power that surged within him. Her gaze drifted to the small, worn leather-bound book on her desk, an ancient grimoire containing spells and prophecies passed down through generations of Ember seers. It was a risky gamble, but she had no choice. She had to seek help, to reach out to an old ally, a sorceress who possessed knowledge and power far beyond her own. It was a dangerous path, one fraught with risks and uncertainty, but the safety of her son lay in the balance. The costs, she knew, would be high, but Merwin was no stranger to paying that price. She had been paying that price for 17 long years, and she would pay it again if it meant securing Kel's future, even if it meant risking her own. The fading veil was not just a physical barrier. It was also a shield against the overwhelming truth of her son's destiny, a truth that she had long fought to protect, a truth that was about to shatter. She had to be ready. They both had to be ready. The time for running was over. The fight had begun. Kale awoke with a gasp, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead, his sheets clinging damply to his skin. The lingering scent of smoke filled his nostrils, a phantom echo of the nightmare that had just released its grip. He sat up, his breath ragged, the darkness of his room pressing in on him like a suffocating shroud. The image of towering flames licking at an impossibly high sky burned behind his eyelids. He saw shadowy figures, tall and gaunt, their faces obscured by swirling darkness, their eyes burning like embers. He heard the screams, a chorus of agony that seemed to claw at the very edges of his sanity. These dreams, once infrequent and easily dismissed as childish fantasies, had become a nightly torment. They were vivid, terrifyingly real, leaving him exhausted and emotionally drained even before the morning sun had a chance to break through the gloom. He tried to explain them to his mother, but the words always failed him, dissolving into a jumble of incoherent whispers and half-formed images. He had attributed them to stress, to the pressure of school, to the unsettling feeling of unease that had been settling over the moorland in recent weeks. But even he knew, deep down, that these nightmares were more than just dreams. He swung his legs over the side of his bed, the chill of the wooden floor sending a shiver through him. He ran his hands through his tousled dark hair, the same unruly hair that his mother often teased, saying it was like a miniature wildfire ready to ignite. A wry smile touched his lips. It was a strange thing to say, considering that his mother, Merwin, had always been so fiercely protective of him, fiercely secretive about their past. She'd shielded him from his true heritage, a heritage she would never fully reveal. Today, however, felt different. An unusual warmth radiated from within him, a strange tingling sensation that started in his fingertips and spread outwards, a wave of energy that made the hair in his arms stand on end. He instinctively stretched his hands towards the hearth, the dying embers glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light. He felt a pull, an undeniable connection to the fire, as if it was a part of him, or perhaps he a part of it. He had always possessed an unusual sensitivity to heat, a heightened awareness of temperature fluctuations that others seemed to notice. He felt the subtle changes in the air, the shifts in atmospheric pressure, the slight variations in the heat radiating from the sun, or a candle flame, or even a person's body. It was a peculiar trait, one that often set him apart, a quirk that he learned to keep to himself, something he hadn't quite understood. He'd written it off as a peculiarity, something he felt only he experienced. This morning, though, it was more than just sensitivity. It was a connection, a deep, intrinsic bond that resonated through his very being. He found himself instinctively drawn to the flames, an almost irresistible urge to reach out and touch the burning embers. He hesitated, a flicker of fear twisting his gut, but the pull was too strong to ignore. His fingers brushed the edges of the cold ashes. A jolt of energy surged through his body, a wave of incandescent heat that ignited from deep within his core. A small spark, barely visible at first, erupted between his fingertips, growing rapidly into a swirling vortex of fire. He gasped, pulling his hand back instinctively, but the flames refused to be extinguished. They danced and flickered, a vibrant, terrifying spectacle that illuminated the small room in an eerie, ethereal glow. Terror seized him, icy fingers gripping his heart. He stumbled backwards, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. He'd never felt anything like this before. This raw, untamed power erupting from within him, threatening to consume him whole. He tried to control it, to extinguish the flames, but his efforts seemed futile. The fire pulsed and throbbed, mirroring the frantic beating of his heart. It was then that he truly understood. He wasn't just sensitive to heat. He was fire. The fire of the Ember Court. The ancient magic of a realm he'd never even known existed. His mother's secrecy, the nightmares, the strange sensitivity. It all clicked into place in a horrifying, exhilarating revelation. The flames continued to dance, a mesmerizing yet terrifying show, their movements reflecting the turmoil within him. He felt a surge of power, a terrifying yet exhilarating energy coursing through his veins, threatening to overwhelm him. A primal energy, raw and untamed, demanding to be unleashed. His gaze landed on his reflection in the hearth's dark metal grate. The flickering flames cast his features in a dramatic chiaroscuro, revealing an intensity he'd never even noticed before. There was strength in his eyes, a flicker of defiance, a nascent power that seemed to defy the terror clenching to his heart. He was afraid, undoubtedly terrified, but beneath the fear, a thrill pulsed, a wild, exhilarating feeling of freedom. He was not just Kale, a boy living in seemingly ordinary life. He was something far greater, far more powerful, a conduit for an ancient, dangerous magic. A low moan escaped his lips as he finally managed to subdue the flames. He watched them diminish, their vibrant glow fading into a mere ember. Yet the heat lingered, a burning reminder of the power he had held within. He was terrified, yes, but also strangely exhilarated. This was not a quirk, not a sensitivity. This was an awakening. His awakening. The sound of his mother's footsteps outside his door brought him back from the precipice of his revelation. The terror returned, twisting his stomach into a knot. He quickly pulled his blanket over himself, pretending to be asleep. His carefully constructed reality, the world he thought he understood, was crumbling around him. The Ember Court was coming, and a part of it had just awakened within him. He heard his mother's hesitant knock, and he closed his eyes, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation. He was ready. Not entirely, but he was ready. A terrifying prospect for a boy who knew nothing of the world that now called him. The world of the Ember Court. The world of fire and shadow. The world he was a part of. The world that was finally, terrifyingly his. The hesitant knock on his door echoed Marin's own trepidation. She stood outside Kale's room, her hand hovering over the rough-hewn wood, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth clinging to her cloak. 17 years. 17 years she had spent shielding him, hiding him from the fiery gaze of the Ember Court, from the insatiable hunger of Queen Serithriel. 17 years of stolen moments, whispered lullabies, and a growing, gnawing fear that had become a part of her very being. She could feel the shift in the air, a subtle change in the magical currents that whispered of his awakening. The fire. She knew it the moment she felt the tremor in the earth, a ripple that started in the depths of the moor and spread outward, a resonating pulse that only a true Ember child could generate. The protective wards she had woven around him, around their humble cottage, were straining, almost screaming under the pressure of his nascent power. The veil was thinning, and the Ember Court was drawing closer. The memory, sharp and agonizing, slammed into her. The flames, the screams, the desperate fight through the shimmering gateway, leaving behind everything she'd ever known, everything she'd ever loved, for the sake of her son. The price of her betrayal still echoed in the hollows of her heart, a relentless drumbeat that shadowed every waking moment. She had chosen him, her Kale, her fire child, over loyalty, over her people. It had been the hardest decision of her life, a decision that had irrevocably altered her destiny, painted her a traitor in the eyes of the Ember Court. Queen Serithriel, with her eyes like chips of obsidian and a heart colder than the deepest winter, had desired Kale as a vessel for the dying king, a desperate attempt to stave off the encroaching darkness that threatened to consume their realm. The ritual had been brutal, savage, a sacrifice that would have consumed Kale's very soul, leaving behind only a hollow shell, a puppet dancing to the dying king's tune. Merwin had known this. She had seen it in the swirling mists of the future, and she had chosen defiance. She had chosen betrayal over sacrificing her own son. The betrayal had not been easy. It had cost her dearly. Friends, allies, the very life she had known within the Emperor Court had turned into ashes in her wake. She had escaped with little more than the clothes on her back and the unwavering love for her son in her heart. She had sought sanctuary in the mortal world, a world so utterly different from the shimmering beauty, the fiery dangers of her homeland. A world that held a certain kind of quiet safety, a deceptive calm that had allowed her to raise Kale in relative peace. But the peace had been a fragile thing, a delicate bubble about to burst. The veil was weakening. The magic that had concealed them was fading. The whispers of the Ember Court, once distant and muted, were growing louder, more menacing, their approach becoming chillingly apparent. She knocked again, softly this time, her knuckles brushing against the wood. "Kale?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a mother's profound anxiety. Are you awake, my love?" Silence. Then a muffled sound, the rustling of sheets. She could feel the vibrations through the door, the settling tremor in the earth emanating from within his room, the undeniable signature of his awakening power. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was bathed in the faint, ethereal glow of the dying embers in the hearth. Kale was sitting up in bed, his eyes wide and haunted, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The remnants of the fire, still visible on his fingertips, shimmered faintly in the dim light. "Mother," he whispered, his voice trembling. His eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and awe. I don't understand." Merwin rushed to his side, her heart aching with the mother's love and terror. She knelt beside him, cupping his face in her hands, her touch gentle yet firm. "It's all right, my son. It's all right. You are safe." The words were a lie, a comforting delusion, but they were all that she could muster in the face of the overwhelming terror threatening to engulf them both. She knew she could no longer shield him, could no longer keep him hidden. The time for secrecy was over. The time for fighting had come. The thought brought a sharp pang of despair. She had faced Queen Cerethral before, had witnessed her ruthless power firsthand. But this time, the stakes were infinitely higher. This time, it wasn't just her life at risk, it was Kale's, and perhaps the fate of both realms. Her mind raced. She had to act, and she had to act quickly. The protective wards were failing. The veil was thinning, and the Ember Court was closing in. There was only one person she could turn to, a long-lost ally, a friend who owed her a debt she had never asked for. A debt that might now be the key to their survival. A risk, a desperate gamble, but one she was willing to take. She knew the journey would be perilous, the path fraught with danger, but she would do anything, absolutely anything, for her son. She would face the queen. She would confront the court, even if it meant facing the wrath of her people, all for a chance a mere flicker of hope for her son's life. That night, under the pale light of the moon, Merwin made a difficult decision. She would seek out Rhiannon, her old friend, even if it meant revealing their hiding place, even if it meant exposing Kale to the very danger she had been working so hard to keep him from. It was a terrifying prospect, but the alternative, inaction, was simply unacceptable. The love for her son, a fierce, unwavering force, pushed her forward. She would fight. She would fight for him until her very last breath, until the last ember of her magic was spent. The fate of Kale, the balance between realms, depended on her courage and her next move. The fading veil was no longer just a metaphor. It was a tangible threat, one that Merwin was ready to confront head on. The weight of their shared destiny settled heavily on her shoulders, a burden that she would carry with unwavering determination. The fight for her son's life, and perhaps the survival of two worlds, had begun. The journey to Rhiannon's secluded cottage was fraught with peril. The path winding through whispering woods and across treacherous bogs. The fading light of the setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows that danced and writhed like the specters of Merwin's past. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. Her senses heightened, alert for any sign of pursuit. The Amber Court's hounds were relentless, their magic woven into their very being, allowing them to track her across realms. Their scent, honed by centuries of hunting those who defied their queen. She clutched a worn leather-bound book close to her chest, its pages filled with ancient prophecies, gleaned from hidden archives within the Amber Court before her escape. It was a dangerous artifact, a piece of history that could condemn her further. But it was her only hope of understanding the true nature of Kale's power, a power that was now far exceeding even her wildest estimations. The prophecies were cryptic, veiled in metaphors and coded language, their meanings obscured by centuries of misinterpretations and deliberate obfuscations. They spoke of a child of fire, born under a blood-red moon, a vessel of immense power, capable of both unimaginable creation and devastating destruction. The descriptions resonated with Kale's birth, the vivid memories of the night he entered the world, a night consumed by an almost supernatural intensity of crimson light, whereas fresh as a wound. The texts hinted at a war between realms, a clash between the Amber Court and a shadowy force, ancient and powerful, one that predated even the Fae themselves. This looming conflict was far grander than any threat she had anticipated. It wasn't just for the survival of her son that was at stake, but the very fabric of reality itself. The prophecies spoke of a balance, a delicate equilibrium between the mortal and Fae worlds, a balance that Kale, with his unique Ember heritage, could either restore or shatter irrevocably. One passage, particularly chilling, described a King of Ash and Ember, a figure of immense destructive power who would rise from the flames, engulfing both realms in a conflagration of unprecedented devastation. The prophecy's ambiguity made it impossible to tell if Kale was destined to be this destroyer or the one to stand against him. It was this ambiguity that created such a paralyzing fear. Was Kale prophesied to bring oblivion to both realms, or save them from it? The weight of this ambiguity crushed Merwin, layering a deeper anxiety on top of her already existing fears. Another section detailed a guardian of the veil, a protector who could stand against the King of Ash and Ember, wielding a power born of starlight and moonlight, a power capable of countering the destructive flames. This passage offered a glimmer of hope, suggesting that not all was lost, that there was still a chance to avert the looming catastrophe. Yet the prophecy was devoid of any clear indication of who this guardian of the veil might be. Could Kale be both the destroyer and the savior? Could destiny be so cruel as to offer such a paradoxical prophecy? As Merowyn delved deeper into the prophecies, a chilling realization dawned upon her. The Ember Court's obsession with Kale wasn't simply about using him as a vessel for their dying king. It was about manipulating his destiny, forcing him to fulfill the darkest aspects of the prophecy, transforming him into the destructive king of Ash and Ember. Queen Cerithiel, in her ruthless ambitions, was willing to sacrifice anything, even her entire realm, to achieve this horrifying outcome. The sheer magnitude of the situation overwhelmed Merowyn. The fate of two worlds rested on her son's shoulders, on his ability to choose his own path, to defy the prophecies and forge his own destiny. She was no longer simply fighting for her son's survival. She was fighting for the survival of everything she held dear. She had to find a way to guide Kale, to help him understand the weight of his destiny, to empower him to choose the path of the Guardian, the path of light and hope, against the seductive and terrifying path of destruction. The journey to Rhiannon's cottage became secondary to the weight of understanding the prophecies. Each step forward seemed as though it carried the weight of both worlds upon her weary shoulders. The whispers of the prophecy echoed in her like a haunting melody, the knowledge a burning brand searing her consciousness. Reaching Rhiannon's cottage, a small secluded dwelling nestled deep within the heart of the woods, felt like emerging from a nightmare into a still, quiet dawn. The air here hummed with a different kind of magic, a gentle, protective energy that wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. Rhiannon, an ancient sorceress with eyes that held the wisdom of centuries, greeted her with a quiet understanding that transcended worlds. The bond between them, forged in the crucible of shared experiences within the Ember Court, was immediate and unwavering. The ancient prophecies provided a harrowing, chilling vision of what the future would hold, what the future could hold. But it also offered a fragile hope. The possibility of her son becoming the guardian of the veil, the very antithesis of the King of Ash and Ember, gave Merowyn a purpose, a reason to fight even harder. The ambiguity within the prophecy was a double-edged sword. While it held the terrifying prospect of Kale becoming the destroyer, it also hinted at a chance for him to rise as a savior. It was a gamble with the fate of both worlds at stake, a chance she was willing to take. Rhiannon, after listening to Merowyn's account, fell silent, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames in the hearth. The prophecy's details were eerily familiar, echoing ancient lore she had studied for decades. She spoke of hidden passages in the Ember Court's archives, passages detailing methods of channeling and controlling Ember magic, techniques that could help Kale master his power and choose his destiny. The next few days were spent poring over forgotten texts, deciphering cryptic runes, and studying ancient diagrams. Rhiannon, with her vast knowledge and experience, guided Merowyn through the treacherous labyrinth of Ember magic, revealing techniques that had been lost to time. They discovered rituals designed to suppress the destructive aspects of Ember magic and amplify its potential for good. The knowledge was both empowering and terrifying, a double-edged sword that could be used to save Kale, or to ultimately destroy him. The path forward was fraught with uncertainties. Queen Cerithiel's forces were closing in, and time was rapidly running out. The veil between realms thinned further each day, the whispers of the Ember Court growing increasingly menacing. Yet Merowyn, armed with ancient knowledge and an unwavering mother's love, prepared to face whatever lay ahead. She had to trust in the fragile hope offered by the prophecy, to trust that her son could be, but there could be both the King of Ash and Ember and the Guardian of the Veil, and that he would ultimately choose to be the Savior. The fate of two worlds, the balance between realms, rested on the shoulders of a 17-year-old boy, a boy who was both child and king, destroyer and savior. And Merwin, his mother, his protector, would fight with every fiber of her being to guide him towards the light, to help him overcome the darkness that threatened to consume them all. The fight, she knew, was far from over. The whispers of the prophecy were a constant reminder of the high stakes, a chilling symphony of impending doom, and the slender thread of hope they had clung to. The final battle was yet to come, but Merwin was ready. She was ready for the coming storm. The crackling fire in Rhiannon's hearth cast dancing shadows on the walls, momentarily distracting Merwin from the gnawing anxiety that clawed at her insides. The air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and ancient herbs, offered little comfort against the impending storm. They had spent days deciphering ancient texts, uncovering long-lost techniques to control Kale's burgeoning ember magic. But the knowledge felt like a fragile shield against an approaching army. The veil between the worlds was thinning, the whispers of the Ember Court growing louder, more menacing with each passing hour. Kale, usually quiet, sat hunched over a worn wooden table, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into its smooth obsidian stone. The stone, a relic from the Ember Court, pulsed faintly with a low, rhythmic hum, a reflection of the chaotic energy simmering beneath his skin. His normally vibrant eyes were shadowed, reflecting the weight of his unknown destiny, the crushing burden of the prophecies. He was no longer just Merwin's son. He was a pawn in a cosmic game, a vessel of immense power capable of both creation and devastation. The very thought sent a shiver down Merwin's spine. Suddenly, a chilling shriek cut through the night stillness. A sound that resonated deep within Merwin's bones. It was a sound she knew all too well. The hunting cry of the Ember Court sounds. The cottage, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap, its walls impossibly thin against the encroaching darkness. Before either Merwin or Kale could react, the cottage doors burst inward, splintering into jagged pieces. 3 figures, cloaked in shadow and radiating a palpable aura of malevolent power, stood silhouetted in the doorway. They were not the monstrous hounds, but elite warriors of the Ember Court, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light, their movements swift and deadly. One, a towering figure with horns that curled like twisted branches, raised a hand and waved an icy energy, and a wave of icy energy washed across the room, freezing the air and silencing the fire. Another, slender and agile, launched a volley of shimmering darts, each tipped with a venomous fey poison. The third, smaller but no less menacing, unleashed a torrent of dark magic, weaving a cage of shadows around them, trapping them within its suffocating embrace. Merwin reacted instantly, her years of training kicking in. She channeled her own ember magic, weaving a shimmering barrier of protective energy around Kale and herself. The icy blast shattered against the barrier, sending tremors through the cottage. She countered the poison darts with a wave of her hand, deflecting them with swift, precise movements. Her movements were precise, her magic controlled, a testament to years spent honing her skills within the Ember Court. This was a defensive battle, her focus solely on keeping her son safe. Kale, however, reacted differently. He didn't weave intricate spells or summon delicate shields. Instead, he roared, a primal sound filled with untamed rage and fear, and a wave of raw, uncontrolled ember magic erupted from him. A chaotic inferno that engulfed the shadowy cage. The flames danced and writhed, a terrifying spectacle of untamed power, burning away the darkness with an almost reckless abandon. His magic was untamed, violent, a reflection of the tempest raging within him. The warriors recoiled, their expressions a mixture of surprise and fear. Kale's raw power, while uncontrolled, was undeniably potent, a stark contrast to Marilyn's carefully honed defensive abilities. The Horde warrior retaliated, unleashing a torrent of energy, but Kale met it head on, his own power surging, an unstoppable wave of fire. The collision sent shockwaves through the cottage, rattling the very foundations. The room vibrated, threatening to collapse in upon them, the air crackling with the intensity of their magical duel. Merwin, seeing the danger, focused her magic, bolstering Kale's raw energy with her experience and control. She channeled her power to help him focus, to guide the untamed inferno, molding the chaos into a controlled force. It was a dangerous gamble, a dance on the edge of disaster, yet she had to act. She had to help him learn, to refine his power before it destroyed them both. The small warrior, seeing the shift in the battle, attempted a flanking maneuver, attempting to break through Merwin's defenses. But Merwin anticipated the move, intercepting the attack with a well-timed counterspell, using her experience to expertly handle the attack. Her movements were practiced and almost graceful compared to her son's raw, uncontrolled power. With a final desperate surge of power, Kale unleashed a wave of pure fire, engulfing the remaining warriors in a searing inferno. The cottage shook violently, the air thick with the smell of burning flesh and magic. When the flames subsided, the warriors were gone, leaving behind only charred remnants of their cloaks and the lingering scent of smoke and fear. They had survived, but the victory was Pyrrhic. The cottage was in ruins, the air thick with the stench of burnt wood magic. Kale, exhausted but exhilarated, slumped against the charred wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His eyes, usually bright and filled with mischief, were clouded with a newfound understanding of the power within him. A power that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Merwin knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. She felt the tremors of his raw power ebbing away, leaving behind the exhausted body of a teenager. The initial assault had been repelled, but the escape had only just begun. The knowledge that they had just faced merely a scouting party sent a chill down her spine. The full might of the Ember Court was yet to come. The fight, she knew, was far from over. The whispers of the prophecies echoed in her minds, a constant reminder of the high stakes, and the chilling realization that the true battle for the fate of the two worlds had only just begun. The thin veil protecting them was not just weakening, it was disintegrating. Their narrow escape had only bought them time, precious little time, before the true storm broke. Part 2. Unveiling the Past. The embers in the ruined hearth cast long, skeletal shadows, mirroring the fractured memories that clawed their way to the surface of Merwin's mind. The scent of wood smoke and burnt magic still clung to the air, a pungent reminder of the near-death experience they just endured. But the immediate threat had receded, leaving behind a chilling stillness broken only by a erratic thump of Kale's heart against his ribs. He slept, exhausted, the raw, untamed power that had surged through him only moments ago, now dormant, leaving him vulnerable and strangely peaceful. Merwin watched over him, her hand resting lightly on his forehead, a silent vigil against the nightmares that threatened to engulf him. The events of the night had peeled back a layer of her carefully constructed facade, revealing the raw, exposed nerves beneath. The fight for survival had forced her to confront not only the immediate threat of the Ember Court, but the weight of her past. The agonizing decision that had led them to this desperate fight. Her mind drifted back to a time before the smoke-filled cottage, before the desperate fight for survival, to the opulent grandeur of the Ember Court, a place she once called home. Images flooded her senses. The shimmering halls, the intricate architecture carved from the living crystal, the air alive with the hum of powerful magic. She saw herself, young and vibrant, a seer of unmatched talent, revered and respected within the court. Her robes, then, were the rich crimson of authority, embroidered with threads of spun starlight. Her laughter echoed in the grand chambers, mingling with the music of ethereal instruments and the murmur of conversations laced with power and secrets. But even in those glorious days, a shadow lurked beneath the surface, a growing unease that gnawed at her heart. She was privy to the court's most closely guarded secrets, the prophecies whispered in hushed tones by the ancient, withered elders. She saw the threads of fate weaving themselves together, a tapestry of power and destruction, a prophecy that spoke of a dying king and a vessel, a child destined to absorb his failing life force, to become a conduit for his dying power. And that child was her son, Kale. The ritual was horrific in its detail, a violation of life itself, a perversion of the natural order. It was meant to preserve the life of the king, but it would destroy the soul of Kale. It would consume him, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell. The revelation struck her like a blow, a sudden, agonizing truth that shattered the illusion of her idyllic life. The conflict within her tore at her soul. Loyalty to her people, to the court that had nurtured her, battled with fierce, primal instinct to protect her son. The choice was unbearable, a weight that threatened to crush her beneath its burden. Days bled into sleepless nights as she wrestled with her decision. Her heart a battlefield where love and duty clashed with brutal force. The elders, blind to her internal torments, pressed for the ritual's execution. They saw Kale only as a means to an end, a vessel for their dying king. They dismissed her concerns, her warnings, their eyes clouded by their own desperation. Their words were cold, their pronouncements unwavering, their belief in their own righteousness unshakable. They failed to see the mother's love, the fierce protectiveness that burned within her, a love that overshadowed any sense of duty or allegiance. The final decision came as a swift, desperate act, a rebellion born of love and desperation. It was a betrayal, yes, but one forged in the crucible of a mother's anguish. She stole Kale, whisking him away in the dead of night, escaping the clutches of the Ember Court, leaving behind everything she'd ever known. The shimmering halls, the ethereal music, the tapestry of power. All of it was left behind, abandoned in exchange for the uncertain safety of the mortal world. The escape was harrowing, fraught with peril. The hounds of the Ember Court, creatures of nightmare and shadow, were unleashed. their baying echoing through the night, their pursuit relentless. She fled, her magic a shield against their relentless assault, her heart a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She found refuge in the mortal world, a world devoid of the breathtaking power of her former life, but one that offered a different kind of protection, the anonymity of ordinary life, the ability to simply be, to live, to keep her son safe. The years that followed were marked by hardship and sacrifice. She lived a life of quiet desperation, her magic her only solace, her only shield against a relentless pursuer, her former people. She channeled her grief into protective spells, weaving a veil of secrecy around her son, a defense that had held for 17 years. The years she spent living in shadows, always watching over his shoulder, gave her a deep insight into how fragile safety could be. The vigilance had honed her defensive skills to the point of perfection. She had transformed from the vibrant seer to a ghost of her former self. But still, she persisted. Now, as the veil between worlds thinned, that shield began to falter. The hounds were back. The whispers were louder. The threat was palpable. The past, once carefully buried secret, now clawed its way to the surface, reminding her of the price she'd paid for her love. The vibrant tapestry of the Ember Court now seemed a distant dream, a faded memory juxtaposed against the stark, unforgiving reality of her present, and a stark reminder of her choice, a choice made out of desperation and love. The weight of her decision, the betrayal of her people, pressed down upon her, a heavy cloak that stifled her breath. But even as she grappled with the enormity of her actions, she knew she would do it all over again, without hesitation. The love for her son, the fierce protectiveness that burned within her, transcended all else. It was a fire as powerful, as untamed, as the ember magic that flowed through Kale's veins. And it was this love, this fierce, unwavering devotion, that would ultimately be their salvation. The memory of her past choice, her betrayal, was a constant reminder that she would do anything, sacrifice everything, for the sake of keeping her son safe. The fight had just begun, but this time, Merwin would not fight alone. Kale's burgeoning power, as untamed as it was now a weapon in their arsenal. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, a stark contrast to the grim determination etched on Marin's face. Kale slept soundly, his breathing even and slow, the tempest of awakened ember magic having subsided. But the respite was fragile, a fleeting moment before the storm began again. Or before the storm broke again. She knew she couldn't rely solely on her own waning strength. She needed allies, powerful allies. She could stand against the might of the Ember Court, but she needed allies to stand with her. Her mind settled on one name, a name whispered in hushed tones even within the hollowed halls of the court. Lyra. Lyra was a sorceress of immense power, a woman who had once been as close to Merwin as a sister. They'd shared secrets, laughter, a deep understanding of magic that transcended worlds. But Lyra had grown disillusioned with the Ember Court's rigid hierarchy and their ruthless pursuit of power. Years ago, she had withdrawn from the court, seeking solitude in the mortal world, a self-imposed exile far from the glittering cages of her former life. Finding her was the first step. Convincing her to help, that was the greater challenge. The journey to Lyra's secluded dwelling was fraught with peril. Merowyn used her remaining magic to mask their presence, weaving illusions and manipulating shadows to evade the lingering scent of the Ember Court's hounds. The mortal world, once a sanctuary, felt more exposed, more vulnerable than ever before. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow cast by the setting sun seemed to hold the potential for danger. Lyra's dwelling was hidden deep within an ancient forest, a place untouched by time, a place where magic clung to the very air. A solitary stone cottage, shrouded in a mist, nestled among gnarled trees that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The air itself crackled with untamed power, a palpable energy that resonated with Merowyn's own fading magic. As she approached the cottage, a wave of apprehension washed over her. The years of separation, the weight of her betrayal, weighed heavily on her shoulders. She didn't know how Lyra would react to her presence, to the knowledge of her return. The thought that her old friend might refuse to help, that her formal loyalty might still hold sway, fueled a fresh surge of fear. Lyra opened the door before Mara even reached out to knock. Her eyes the same shade of deep emerald green as Mara remembered. Piercing and sharp, instantly assessing her. The years had etched lines into Lyra's face, but her posture still held the regal bearing of a sorceress accustomed to power, a silent affirmation of her might. Merowyn, Lyra said, her voice a low murmur, neither welcoming nor hostile. I haven't expected to see you again. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Betrayal, desertion, abandonment. Merowyn met Lyra's gaze, her own eyes mirroring the storm within. I need your help, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. The Ember Court is coming for my son. Lyra studied her gaze lingering on Kale, who was still asleep in Merowyn's arms. The unspoken question hung in the air. What kind of power does this child possess? What was Merowyn hiding? I know why you left, Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper, a statement rather than a question. The words held a mix of accusation and understanding, the unspoken acknowledgement that Merowyn's actions, though born of love, had been a grave betrayal of everything they stood for. The past haunted both of them, a constant gnawing reminder of fractured bonds. Merowyn swallowed hard, the bitter taste of her past actions rising in her throat. She recounted the events of the past 17 years, the prophecy, the ritual, the desperate escape. She spoke of the love that had fueled her decision, the fear that had driven her actions. She laid bare her soul, revealing the agonizing choices she'd made, the sacrifices she's endured. She painted a vivid picture of the relentless pursuit by the Ember Court, their insatiable hunger for power, the growing threat to both the mortal and the Fey realms. She spoke of Kale's nascent power, the fire that burned within him, a power that grew stronger with each passing day, a power both terrifying and wondrous, as powerful and as unpredictable as a raging wildfire. As Merowyn spoke, Lyra's initial coldness began to thaw, replaced by a weary curiosity, a cautious concern. The gravity of the situation, the undeniable threat to both realms, seeped into her consciousness. The mortal world, initially a sanctuary for her own weary soul, suddenly seemed inextricably linked to the fate of the Fae. This was no longer merely Merowyn's problem. It was a crisis that threatened to engulf them both. When Merowyn finished, a long silence filled the cottage, broken only by the cackling of the fire. Lyra looked at Merowyn, then at Kale, a storm of conflicting emotions swirling in her eyes. Finally, Lyra spoke. The Ember Court is a force to be reckoned with. Their power is ancient. their reach limitless, but their ruthlessness will be their undoing. I will help you, Merwin. But you must tell me everything. Not just about the prophecy, not just about the coming war, but about Kale, about the true extent of his power, about the destiny that awaits him. There is more to it than what you've already revealed. Merwin hesitated, the weight of her secret heavy on her chest. Revealing the complete truth about Kale's destiny, about his role in the prophecy, would be a monumental step. A gamble that could change the courses of their lives forever. But she knew that without Lyra's full understanding, their chances of survival were slim. With a deep breath, Marin poured out the full extent of Kale's destiny, the terrifying truth about his power, the precarious balance of his fate. She revealed the whispers of the ancient prophecies, the grim details of the ritual, and the hidden power that slept within her son, a power that could save both worlds or destroy them. Lyra listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Marin finished, Lyra nodded slowly. The stakes are higher than we both realized, she said, her voice low and serious. But we must prepare. We will train Kale, hone his power, prepare him for what lies ahead. It will not be easy. The Ember Court's magic is powerful and ancient. Their vengeance will be swift and brutal, but together we will stand against them. For your son, for the fate of both our worlds. The days that followed were a blur of intense training. Lyra, with her immense knowledge and power, helped Kale unlock the full potential of his Ember magic, guiding him through the treacherous currents of his own power. Kale, initially reluctant, slowly began embracing his destiny, finding strength and confidence in his newfound abilities. He trained relentlessly, honing his skills, mastering his power, forging himself into a weapon capable of facing the relentless hounds of the Ember Court. Merwin, in turn, focused on improving her defense skills, her every muscle memory honed to perfection. It was a race against time, a desperate struggle against a looming war. The training was rigorous, pushing both mother and son to their limits, forging an unbreakable bond between them. One forged not only in love, but in the shared responsibility of saving two worlds. The grim determination to survive hardened their resolve, and they trained relentlessly, pushing themselves beyond their breaking point, creating a connection as strong and unyielding as magic that pulsed through their veins. Their past betrayal, now a shared burden, only strengthened their resolve. This partnership, forged in adversity, bound by love and shared destiny, would be their most valuable asset in the impending battle. The fight for survival had begun. The forest, Lyra's sanctuary, served as Kale's initial training ground. The ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching towards the heavens like supplicating arms, seemed to hum with a Latin magic, a silent testament to the power that pulsed beneath the earth. Lyra, her emerald eyes gleaming with a fierce intensity, began by teaching Kale the basics: control, focus, channeling the raw, untamed fire within him. It wasn't simply about unleashing the inferno. It was about sculpting the flames, shaping them to his will, molding them into weapons of precision and power, rather than instruments of uncontrolled destruction. The initial sessions were fraught with frustration. Kale's Ember magic, still nascent, was volatile, unpredictable, a raging wildfire that threatened to consume him as much as his enemies. He struggled to contain the flames, to direct their energy, to prevent them from engulfing him in their fiery embrace. His frustrations manifested as bursts of uncontrolled energy, sending plumes of smoke and sparks erupting into the air, leaving behind a trail of charred earth. Lyra, however, remained patient, her guidance firm but gentle. her words weaving a tapestry of understanding and encouragement, soothing the raw edges of his fear and uncertainty. She taught him to visualize the flames, to feel their energy coursing through his veins, to sense their rhythms, to hear their whispers. She showed him how to breathe with the flames, how to become one with the fire, how to harness its power without being consumed by it. She used ancient incantations, whispers of forgotten tongues, to channel and amplify his abilities, weaving spells that strengthened his control and amplified his focus. She introduced him to elemental meditations, teaching him to commune with the earth, the wind, and the very essence of the fire itself, allowing him to draw strength and grounding from nature's rhythms. Each failed attempt was a lesson, each controlled burst of energy a testament of the power he possessed. As the days turned into weeks, Kale's control began to improve. The furious bursts of uncontrolled flames became gentler, more manageable. He learned to conjure small, flickering embers, then larger, more intense flames, shaping them into swirling vortexes, protective shields, and razor-sharp projectiles. He discovered a fluidity in his movements, his body becoming an extension of the fire, responding to its rhythms, dancing with its energy. Lyra's patient guidance chipped away at his uncertainty, nurturing his growing self-belief. His initial fear gave way to a cautious confidence, a growing understanding of his own potential. The forest became a testament to his growing mastery, a canvas upon which he painted his progress with embers and smoke. The training progressed beyond the confines of the forest. Lyra led Kale to the ruins of an ancient city, a place where the very stones hummed with forgotten magic. Here, the air crackled with potent energy, the remnants of a civilization that once commanded the elements. The ruins, a labyrinth of crumbled walls and shattered monuments, became a new testing ground, a crucible where Kale's abilities were further honed and refined. The scale of his training expanded. He learned to manipulate larger volumes of fire, to summon towering walls of flame, to conjure raging infernos that consumed everything in their path, yet did so with precision, directing the fiery chaos. He practiced his defense, learning to weave fire into impenetrable shields, deflecting incoming attacks, creating a protective barrier against any would-be assailant. He discovered the subtle art of controlling the intensity of his flames, shaping them into delicate wisps or searing blasts, adapting his tactics to any circumstances. Beyond the physical training, Lyra helped Kale confront his heritage, his identity as the son of a seer and the child of prophecy. She delved into the ancient texts, deciphering cryptic prophecies and forgotten lore. She helped him to understand the weight of his destiny, the responsibility that rested on his shoulders, the immense power he possessed, and the potential consequences of its misuse. She encouraged him to question his identity, to reconcile his human side with his powerful Fae heritage, to forge his own battle, or to forge his own path, rather than be defined by the prophecy. These conversations were as crucial as the physical training. Kale wrestled with his newfound power, his anxieties mirroring the volatile nature of his magic. He grappled with the knowledge that he was destined to play a significant role in a conflict that threatened both worlds, a burden that weighed heavily on his young shoulders. He questioned his capacity to handle the immense responsibility, his self-doubt echoing the uncertainty of his still developing abilities. Through these struggles, Lyra served as both teacher and mentor, a guide who helped him navigate the treacherous waters of self-discovery and self-acceptance. She instilled in him the importance of self-control, not only over his ember magic, but also over his emotions, his anxieties, his self-doubt. She taught him that true power resided not just in the ability to manipulate fire, but in the strength of his spirit, the resilience of his character, and the unwavering clarity of his intentions. Their training sessions in the ancient ruins became more than just exercises in power. They became rituals of self-discovery, moments of introspection, chances to connect with the echoes of a forgotten past. The ruins themselves seemed to resonate with Kale's journey, their silent stones whispering encouragement and strength, mirroring the growing confidence within him. As his powers matured, so did his understanding of his own identity. He was no longer simply the boy who had lived in hiding, shielded from the world. He was Kale, the son of Merwin, the child of prophecy, a being of immense power, destined to play a pivotal role in the fate of two worlds. But more than that, he was himself, an individual forging his own path, defining his own destiny, shaping his own future. The final stage of his training took place under the light of the full moon, amidst the skeletal remains of a colossal temple. Here, Kale performed a ritual of empowerment, channeling the raw power of the moon, the earth, and the very essence of the Ember Court's magic itself. He stood amidst towering pillars of flame, their heat intense but controlled, their light illuminating his determined face. He faced his fears, embraced his destiny, and emerged stronger, more confident, more powerful than ever before. He was ready. The storm was coming, but he was ready to meet it. His training was complete. He was ready to face the Ember Court, not just as a weapon, but as a warrior forged in the fires of adversity and determined to protect his mother and both worlds from the approaching darkness. The battle was about to begin. The wind carried a whisper, a chilling premonition that sliced through the tranquility of their secluded haven. Merwin felt it first, a tremor in the earth, a subtle shift in the magical currents that had for so long shielded them. The protective veil, woven from her own dwindling power, was fraying at the edges. The Ember Court was closer than ever. Kale, sensing his mother's apprehension, looked up from the practice he'd been undertaking, shaping a miniature sun of contained fire into a spinning orb, a skill Lyra had painstakingly honed in him. His normally vibrant eyes, usually reflecting the untamed fire within, held a worried intensity. The training, grueling as it had been, hadn't prepared him for this. He was ready to fight, yes, but the sheer magnitude of the impending threat loomed, a monstrous shadow casting its ominous pall over their fragile peace. The attack didn't come as a subtle incursion, a stealthy ambush. It arrived with the fury of a storm, tearing the veil between worlds asunder. The land around them warped and twisted, the familiar landscape of the mortal world blurring into the ethereal beauty of the Ember Court's fading domain. Trees contorted into grotesque shapes, their leaves shimmering with otherworldly luminescence, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed with an unsteady energy. It was a chaotic ballet of realms, a breathtakingly terrifying display of encroaching power. From the swirling vortex of distorted reality emerged the vanguard of Queen Cerithiel's army. They were not the ragged, easily dispatched soldiers Kale had envisioned in his worst nightmares. These were elite warriors, honed to perfection, their movements fluid and lethal, their weapons imbued with a chilling magic that sent shivers down his spine. Their armor, crafted from obsidian and shimmering with arcane runes, seemed to absorb the light itself, rendering them ominous figures against the backdrop of the shifting landscape. Leading the charge were three formidable figures, their presence exuding an aura of raw power that pressed down on Morin and Kale, threatening to crush them under its weight. The first was a hulking brute, his physique augmented by dark magic, his muscles rippling beneath scarred black leather armor. He wielded a great sword that cackled with dark energy, the blade dripping with what appeared to be solidified shadows. His eyes burned with a malevolent fire, a stark contrast to the ethereal glow of the distorted landscape. The second warrior, graceful and lethal, was a master of illusions, her movements blurring, her form constantly shifting, making it impossible to predict her attacks. Her twin daggers, adorned with shimmering amethysts, whispered with a disorienting magic, their sharp edges promising a swift, silent death. And lastly, the third, a formidable sorceress whose power rivaled Marin's own. She wore robes woven from starlight, her eyes blazing with a cold, calculating intelligence. Her hands pulsed with raw magical energy, ready to unleash spells of unimaginable destruction. Merwin, her resolve hardening, stepped forward, her protective magic flaring. Her own power was strained, diminished by years of concealment and the weight of her secret. But the mother bear instinct within her was awakened, fiercer and more protective than any magic. She raised her hands, weaving a complex spell, a shield of shimmering energy that rippled as the first assault struck. The dark magic of the hulking warrior slammed against the shield, causing it to buckle and to groan. But it held, a testament to Merwin's resilience and her deep connection to the ancient magic of her people. Kale, beside her, mirrored his mother's actions. He wasn't merely reacting, he was anticipating, moving with a grace that surprised even himself. The training under Lyra's guidance had been effective. It wasn't just about raw power, but precision and control. He conjured a wall of fire, a shimmering barrier of intense heat that reflects the sorcerer's initial onslaught of dark energy bolts. The flames danced and shifted, adapting to the incoming attacks, absorbing the power of the spells and reflecting them back towards their source. The battle raged, a brutal dance between mortal and fey magic, a clash of wills and powers. Kale's fire danced with the shadowy attacks, weaving a protective barrier around his mother. He learned to anticipate the shifting form of the illusionists, his flames scorching her fleeting images, forcing her to materialize for just a moment, enough for a well-placed attack to break her rhythm. Merwin, meanwhile, countered the sorceress' magic with her own, using the knowledge of ancient Ember Court lore to disrupt her spells with weakening her power. The landscape itself seemed to fight against them. The merging worlds created perilous traps and unpredictable terrain, forcing them to adapt their fighting styles, relying on instinct as much as skill. At times, the ground beneath their feet dissolved into shimmering pools of otherworldly energy, threatening to swallow them whole. Other times, monstrous, thorny vines erupted from the earth, reaching out with sharp, magical barbs, intent on ripping them to shreds. Through it all, their bond deepened. It wasn't just a mother and son fighting for survival. It was a symphony of cooperation, a seamless interplay of power that pushed them to heights they never thought possible. They covered each other's weaknesses, anticipating each other's moves, their actions fluid and synchronized. The initial fear gave way to a fierce determination, a shared purpose that fueled their very attack. The battle reached its climax as Queen Cerithiel's forces were pushed back. But the fight was far from over. It had merely entered a new and more dangerous phase. The initial onslaught had been a calculated test, a probe to gauge their strength, their capabilities, the extent of Kale's awakened power. The true assault, Cerethral's true gambit, was yet to come. The respite was brief, a lull before the storm, as the fading light of the distorted reality painted a chilling tableau of the coming confrontation. The Queen's true game had only just begun, and Merwin and Kale knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning of their fight for survival. The fate of two worlds hung precariously in the balance, their very destinies intertwined in a dance of fire and shadow. A struggle for survival that would test the limits of their strength, their love, and their will to live. The coming days would prove if they were truly ready to face the storm. The retreat of Queen Cerethral's vanguard wasn't a rout. It was a calculated withdrawal, a strategic repositioning. The air, thick with a lingering scent of ozone and scorched earth, crackled with a tense silence. Merwin and Kale, leaning against each other, breaths ragged, felt the unspoken understanding hanging between them. The fight was far from over. The initial assault had been a brutal test, a prelude to something far more sinister. The true face of Cerethral's wrath remained veiled, a dark storm gathering on the horizon. Merwin, her magic depleted but her spirit unbroken, examined the ravaged landscape. The fusion of mortal and fey realms had left the area scarred, a tapestry of twisted trees and shimmering pools of unstable energy. The ground still trembled subtly, a reminder of the potent magic that had clashed above it. She sensed a lingering residue of dark magic, a subtle taint clinging to the air, a persistent whisper of Cerethral's power. The Queen hadn't simply tested their strength. She had marked their territory, leaving a silent warning. Gale, his own fire subdued to embers, felt the exhaustion gnawing at his body. Yet his eyes burned with an inner fire, an awakening he couldn't fully comprehend. He'd drawn upon powers he hadn't known existed, a wellspring of potent ember magic that responded instinctively to the threat, surging to life with terrifying intensity. Lyra's training, once a tedious exercise now felt like a life-saving gift, a foundation upon which he'd built unexpected prowess. He'd faced death and emerged stronger, more resolute, his understanding of his heritage deepening with every passing moment. As they caught the breath, a faint shimmer caught Merwin's eye. It wasn't a manifestation of the still unstable magic currents. It was deliberate, subtle, a flicker of light hidden within the shadow depths of a nearby grove. Curiosity and a threat of cautious hope pulled her towards it. Kale, sensing her apprehension, fell in behind her beside her, his hand brushing against hers. The unspoken understanding between them solidified. They were not alone. The shimmer resolved itself into a figure, cloaked and hooded, their features obscured to shadow. As they emerged from the protective cover of the trees, a gasp escaped Merwin's lips. It was an Ember Court warrior, but unlike the obsidian-clad soldiers that had attacked, this one wore garments woven from moonlight, their silver threads shimmering with an ethereal glow. Their presence, instead of radiating cold power, emanated a quiet strength, a sense of restrained power that contrasted sharply within the aggressive magic of Cerethral's forces. "You You shouldn't be here, Merwin breathed, her voice laced with surprise and a touch of fear. The warrior's silence was unsettling, yet there was a subtle shift in the air, a lessening of the dark magical residue, as if the presence of this individual had a cleansing effect. The warrior raised a hand, slowly removing the hood. Revealed was a face both beautiful and fierce, framed by hair the color of spun moonlight. Her eyes, the color of amethyst, held a depth of sadness, yet they also shone with an unwavering determination. She introduced herself as Lyra, a name that sent a jolt of recognition through Merwin. Lyra, the name whispered in hushed tones within the Ember Court, a name synonymous with rebellion and defiance. Queen Cerithriel has lost her way, Lyra began, her voice low and melodic, a striking contrast to the harsh sounds of battle that had recently ceased. She seeks to wield the ancient power for her own twisted ambitions, ignoring the delicate balance between our worlds. I could not stand idly by. Lyra's words explained the subtle shift in the magical currents, the unexpected aid that had suddenly helped them during the fight. She revealed that she'd been secretly manipulating the battle, weakening Cerithriel's forces through subtle magical interference, directing attacks and causing confusion within their ranks. Her skill was masterful, her actions almost imperceptible, yet their impact had been profound. She'd been their unseen ally, a silent guardian watching over them. I know of your past, Merwin, Lyra continued, her gaze unwavering. Of your sacrifice, of Kale's destiny. Queen Cerithriel's intentions are far more sinister than simply reclaiming her rightful heir. She seeks to unleash a power that will shatter the balance between the worlds, plunging both into chaos. Lyra revealed a hidden history within the Ember Court, a clandestine faction opposed to Cerithriel's tyranny, a group fighting in the shadows for a future where magic would serve the balance, not destruction. This group, she explained, was small, but their influence extended deeper than anyone suspected. They had been waiting for an opportunity, a spark of hope, to turn the tide against the Queen's growing power. Their conversation continued into the night. The three of them huddled together, sharing stories and exchanging information. Lyra shared ancient prophecies, revealing hidden details of the Ember Court's history and the true nature of Kale's destiny. She confirmed that Kale was indeed destined to be a vessel, but not in the way Cerithriel envisioned. His power could be used to restore balance, to heal the rift between the worlds, not to destroy them. She explained that the ember magic that resided within Kale was not just fire, but the essence of both worlds, a bridge between mortal and Fey realms. Merwin, in turn, shared her past, her struggles, and the sacrifices she made for her son. The weight of years of secrecy lifted slightly as she found a kindred spirit, someone who understood the burden of protecting a powerful secret. She revealed her knowledge of the fading protective magic and the desperate measures she had been forced to take. Lyra, in turn, offered insights into enhancing Kale's control over his powers, showing him techniques he'd never encountered before. The revelation of Lyra's presence and her alliance was a turning point, It wasn't simply a matter of survival anymore. It was a fight for the future, a struggle against a tyrannical queen, and a fight to shape Kale's destiny. Their newly formed alliance, built on shared secrets, mutual respect, and a desperate desire for freedom and survival, gave them a renewed sense of purpose. The shifting landscape, however, remained a constant reminder of the danger that loomed. The unstable magic pulsed beneath their feet, the echoes of the previous battle still reverberating in the air. They knew that Cerethriel would return, that her true attack was yet to come. The peace of their newfound alliance was a fragile thing, a precarious balance that had hung on a thread. The coming confrontation would be more complex, more nuanced, and far more deadly than anything they had faced before. The three of them would need all their strength, all their cunning, all their powers combined to face whatever darkness Cerethriel was preparing to unleash. Their fight for survival was only just beginning. The journey ahead would test the limits of their abilities, the strength of their bond, and the depth of their resolve. The fate of two worlds and the destiny of one young man rested on the precarious edge of a knife. Part 3: Clash of the Worlds. The dawn arrived, not with the gentle blush of sunrise, but with a furious eruption of magical energy. The air itself vibrated, a palpable hum that resonated deep within their bones. Cerethriel's army, a tide of obsidian and shadow, surged from the fractured landscape, their ranks swollen with reinforcements, their power amplified by malevolent magic that twisted the very fabric of reality. This wasn't a skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion, a desperate attempt to reclaim what Cerethriel believed was rightfully hers. Merwin, Lyra, and Kale stood poised on a ridge overlooking the battlefield. The mortal world and the Fey realm blurred at the edges, the clash of magic creating a chaotic spectacle of shifting landscape and unpredictable energies. Kale, his face grim, felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He was no longer just Merwin's son, fleeing from a vengeful queen. He was the key to a war that had raged for centuries, a pivotal figure in a battle for the survival of two worlds. The battle began with a cacophony of sound and fury. The Ember Court warriors, their armor gleaming under the unnatural light, clashed with the mortal soldiers, their weapons imbued with arcane power. The sky crackled with bolts of energy, the earth trembled with each impact, and the air itself thrummed with raw magic. Merwin, her eyes blazing with determination, moved like a phantom and amidst the chaos, weaving intricate spells, shielding her son and Lyra, her movements fluid and precise, a dance of death and protection. Lyra, her own magic shimmering with an ethereal grace, operated from a different plane. She didn't engage in direct combat. Her magic was subtler, more strategic. She manipulated the currents of energy, disrupting Cerethriel's attacks, creating illusions to confuse her opponents, and subtly enhancing the power of Merwin and Kale. Her mastery of the Fey arts was breathtaking, her actions a ballet of calculated chaos, turning the tide of battle with unseen interventions. Kale, initially hesitant, found his footing amidst the maelstrom. The training with Lyra had prepared him for this, transforming him from a fearful boy into a formidable warrior. He unleashed his ember magic with a raw power that shocked even Merwin. His flames weren't just destructive, they were strategic, weaving patterns of defense and offense, creating barriers and unleashing searing blasts of energy that tore through Cerethral's ranks. He was no longer a vessel. He was the storm. But Cerethrial, the epitome of malevolent power, was a formidable opponent. Her magic was a darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. She summoned monstrous creatures from the depths of the Fey realm, twisted and corrupted beings that fought with terrifying savagery. She hurled bolts of shadow magic that tore through the defenses, her attacks fueled by a potent blend of rage and desperation. She was fighting not just for her crown, but for her very existence. The battle raged for hours, a breathtaking ballet of destruction and defiance. The ground beneath them shifted and changed, the lines between worlds dissolving and reforming, creating a surreal battlefield of shifting landscapes and impossible vistas. Merwin and Kale, their energies intertwined, fought with a ferocity born of love and desperation. Lyra, ever vigilant, continued her subtle manipulations, her magic a silent guardian against the overwhelming force of Cerethral's army. The turning point came when Kale, fueled by a surge of righteous anger, unleashed a torrent of ember magic, a wave of pure energy that swept across the battlefield. It wasn't just fire. It was a raw expression of his destiny, a fusion of mortal and fey power that resonated with the very heart of the conflict. The force of the blast shattered Cerethral's defenses, scattering her forces and breaking the momentum of her attack. But Cerethral, undeterred, retaliated with a wave of shadow magic so powerful that it threatened to consume them all. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to claim victory. Merwin and Lyra countered with their own magic, creating a shield of interwoven energy that deflected the worst of the attack. However, the sheer power of Cerethral's spell left them weakened and vulnerable. Kale, seeing his mother and Lyra faltering, stepped forward. He didn't unleash another destructive blast. Instead, he channeled his ember magic in a different way. He created a bridge of pure energy, a shimmering pathway that connected the mortal world and the Fey realm, a conduit that drew upon the very essence of both worlds. This was not an attack, but a redirection of power, a subtle shift that disarmed Cerethral's magic and weakened her hold on the battle. The shift in power was immediate. Cerethral's army, weakened and demoralized, began to retreat. Her own power, once seemingly limitless, flickered and diminished, her grasp on the magic currents loosening. The tide of the battle had turned, not through brute force, but through a strategic understanding of the power that flowed through Kale and the ancient magic of the Ember Court. With Cerethral's army in disarray, Merwin and Lyra moved in for the final strike. They attacked in coordination, a combined assault that channeled the full force of their combined powers. Merwin, her movements swift and decisive, unleashed a barrage of spells, while Lyra, with her precise manipulation of fey magic, amplified the power of each attack. Kale, understanding his role, focused his own power, guiding the combined magic towards his target. Cerethral, her power waning, was no match for their unified assault. She fought back with desperate fury, but it was futile. Her magic, once a force of nature, was now a flickering flame, easily extinguished. Finally, with a final surge of power, their combined magic struck, shattering Cerethral's hold on the battlefield and breaking her control over the corrupted creatures she had summoned. The queen screamed as her power crumbled, and her form flickered and dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint whisper of shadow and the lingering smell of ozone. The battle ended not with a triumphant roar, but with an exhausted silence. The landscape, once a scene of chaotic destruction, now lay in ruins, a testament to the immense power that had been unleashed. Merwin, Lyra, and Kale stood together, their bodies weary, their magic depleted, but their spirits unbroken. They had won, not just a battle, but a war, protecting the delicate balance between two worlds and securing Kale's destiny. The future was uncertain, but for now they had earned a moment of peace, a fragile respite in the aftermath of a cataclysmic conflict. The scars of battle remained, a stark reminder of the fight, a testament to their combined strength, a promise of a new dawn. The fight for balance was far from over, but for now, the three stood victorious, together against the darkness. The silence that followed Cerethriel's demise was heavier than the roar of the battle that preceded it. The air, thick with the lingering scent of ozone and the faint whisper of dissipating shadow magic, hung heavy and still. Merwin knelt beside Kale, her fingers tracing the burns on his arms, the fiery scars a testament to the power he had unleashed. Lyra, her face pale but resolute, stood guard, her ethereal glow a beacon in the ravaged landscape. Kale, however, felt none of the elation that should have accompanied their victory. The triumph felt hollow, a Pyrrhic victory won at a terrible cost. He stared at his hands, the embers of his magic still flickering faintly, and a profound sense of unease washed over him. The battle was won, but the war, it seemed, was far from over. He'd faced Cerethriel and her army, the shadows of the Ember Court, and emerged victorious. But the victory didn't bring him peace. Instead, it brought a crushing weight, a chilling awareness of what awaited him. He was not just a warrior who had won a battle. He was a key, a vessel, a prophesied instrument in a conflict far older and more intricate than he ever imagined. The whispers had started subtly, a faint echo in the aftermath of the battle, a discordant note in the symphony of victory. They were the voices of the Ember Court, the remnants of Cerethriel's fallen army, their fractured power still reaching out, still attempting to claim him. They called him back, not as a conqueror, but as their king, their destined ruler, the vessel for the dying spirit of their monarch. This was the choice he had to make, the choice that had haunted him even before the battle began. Embrace the prophecy, become the vessel, and inherit the mantle of the Ember Court's dying king. A king who, from what Merwin had pieced together from scattered fragments of ancient text, had been consumed by darkness, a shadow of his former self. Or reject this fate, reject his destiny, and forge his own path. A path unknown, perilous, and possibly leading to the destruction of both worlds. He looked at his mother, her face etched with worry, her eyes reflecting the flames of his internal conflict. He saw the exhaustion in her posture, the tremor in her hand as she continued to tend to his wounds. He understood her fear, her desperate hope that he would choose life, a life away from the suffocating grip of prophecy. He understood, but he couldn't escape the weight of his own destiny. Lyra, sensing the turmoil within him, approached slowly. She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, her touch conveying a silent message of support, a silent promise of aid, whatever path he chose. Her knowledge of the Faerun, her understanding of ancient prophecies, was vast, yet her advice remained unspoken, a silent acknowledgement of the profound weight of his decision. The choice wasn't hers to make, it was his to bear. The remaining embers of Cerethriel's army, dispersed, but not destroyed, lingered in the shadows, their whispers growing stronger, their power subtly manipulating the very fabric of reality around him. He could feel their influence, a dark tide tugging at his very essence, attempting to pull him towards the destiny they craved. Their voices were a chorus of despair, fear, and desperate hope, a chilling testament to the power of a lost king and the desperate clinging to a fading legacy. The choice felt impossible, a cruel paradox. He could save the Ember Court, bring order to a fractured world, and restore balance to the realms, but at what cost? At the cost of his own soul, his own identity, his own freedom. He was, after all, the son of a woman who had betrayed her people to save him, a boy raised in the mortal world, sheltered from the dark magic and ancient traditions of the Pharaoh. Could he truly accept the life of a king, bound to a legacy of darkness, a legacy he had never asked for? The image of his mother, her face etched with the pain of sacrifice, flashed through his mind. He remembered her stories, whispered secrets about a lost world, a world of majestic beauty and terrible darkness, a world where magic was not a tool, but a way of life, a world from which she had fled to save him. The thought of subjecting himself to that world, to the very power she had risked everything to escape, filled him with a chilling dread. He closed his eyes, seeking strength within himself, within the memory of his mother's love, and the quiet, steadfast support of Lyra. He was not simply the vessel. He was Kale, a mortal boy, thrust into a world of fey magic and ancient prophecies. He had his own desires, his own hopes, his own path. He had his own life to live, even if that life meant challenging the very destiny that had been laid out before him. He opened his eyes, his gaze settling upon the shattered remnants of Cerethriel's army, the fading whispers of their desperate pleas echoing around him. He felt a surge of defiance within him, a spark of resistance against the forces that sought to control him. He would not be a puppet. He would not be a vessel. He would carve out his own destiny. This was not simply a choice between embracing prophecy or rejecting it. It was a choice between submitting to an ancient fate and forging his own path, a path that might be more dangerous, more uncertain, but ultimately more his own. He would not become the instrument of the dying king. He would become the architect of his own future, a future that he would shape with his own hands, with his own magic, and with the help of those that stood beside him. He would face whatever consequences awaited him, whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he stood on the precipice of a new dawn, a dawn of his own making. The choice was made. His destiny, for better or worse, was now his to define. The fight had just begun. The true battle, the battle for his own soul, was now upon him. He looked at Merwin and Lyra, a silent understanding passing between them. The battle against Cerethriel had been a fight for survival. This, the fight for his soul, was a battle for his very essence. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. It was a path fraught with danger, unknown challenges, and the possibility of failure. But it was his path, and he would walk it, not as a puppet of destiny, but as a master of his own fate. The first tendril of Kale's ember magic snaked out, a crimson whip of pure energy, lashing out at a spectral hound that materialized from the swirling shadows. It wasn't the clumsy, uncontrolled outburst from their earlier fight with Cerethriel. This was precise, focused, a dance of destruction. The hound, a creature of pure shadow and corrupted fate energy, dissolved into nothingness upon contact, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and the lingering chill of the netherworld. Merwin, seeing the change in her son, felt a surge of pride mingled with a deep, abiding fear. His power was growing, evolving, surpassing anything she had ever witnessed. The dormant magic within him, the very essence of the Amber Court, was finally awakening, but it was a wild, untamed force that needed to be guided, controlled, before it consumed entirely. She raised her own hands, her fingers glowing with an ethereal light, a stark contrast to Kale's fiery magic. Her magic, born of the elderwood and steeped in ancient secrets, was a soothing balm, a counterpoint to her son's raging inferno. She wove a spell of protection around him, a shimmering shield that deflected the stray tendrils of his power, preventing them from harming him. The two forms of magic intertwined, a ballet of fire and light, destruction and preservation, a testament to their intertwined destinies. A wave of shadow tendrils, the remnants of Cerethiel's defeated army, surged towards them, intent on overwhelming them. Kale met the onslaught with a roar, his magic erupting in a fiery explosion that pushed back the darkness, carving a swath of destruction through the remaining phantoms. But these were not mere shadows. They were fragments of a corrupted fey magic, imbued with the lingering power that threatened to overwhelm them. Merwin, ever vigilant, countered the onslaught with her own magic, creating a wall of shimmering energy that absorbed the dark tendrils, channeling their corrupted energy into harmless sparks of light. She drew upon ancient spells, whispered incantations, passed down through generations of Ember Court seers. Spells designed to contain and neutralize the chaotic energy of the netherworld. The air crackled with energy, the clash of their two magics, painting a vivid tapestry of light and shadow across the ravaged landscape. Their combined power was a force to be reckoned with. Kale's raw, untamed magic, the burning heart of the Ember Court, combined with Merwin's refined control and ancient knowledge, created a synergy that surpassed the sum of their individual abilities. They moved as one, a dance of destruction and creation, a symphony of fire and light. Their combined powers, a breathtaking spectacle that both terrified and inspired. They were a united front, mother and son, their bond forged in the crucible of sacrifice and love, unbreakable, indestructible. The shadowy figures, initially aggressive and relentless, began to falter. Their attacks became weaker, more disjointed, their power draining away under the relentless assault of Merwin and Kale's combined might. The spectral hounds yelped and dissolved. The shadowy warriors flickered and faded, their forms becoming less solid, less threatening. They were being undone, not simply defeated, but eradicated from existence. This wasn't just a battle of magic, it was a battle of wills. Kale fought not just for survival, but for his own identity, for the right to choose his own destiny, to reject the predetermined path laid out before him. Merwin fought not just for her son, but for the memory of her people, for the hope of redemption, for the chance to rewrite the future, to erase the stain of her past betrayal. The remaining shadows, sensing their imminent demise, unleashed a final desperate attack. A wave of pure darkness surged towards them, a tsunami of corrupted energy intent on engulfing them. Kale, bracing himself for the inevitable, felt a surge of fear, a chilling wave of despair. This was it. This was the end. But then, he felt his mother's hand gripping his, her strength surprising him. Her eyes, shining with an unwavering resolve, conveyed a message of faith, a silent promise of support. She wasn't just a shield. She was his anchor, his strength, his unwavering belief in his ability to overcome. He felt his fear receding, replaced by a wave of determination that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Together, mother and son unleashed the full force of their combined power. Kale channeled the raw energy of his ember magic, a fiery torrent that cut through the darkness, creating a path of destruction. Merwin, weaving a counterspell of unimaginable complexity, absorbed the remaining shadow energy, channeling it into a blinding flash of light that disintegrated the final remnants of Cerethral's army. The remaining darkness dissipated, leaving behind only the silence of victory. The air, once thick with a stench of shadow magic, now felt clean, clear, invigorated. The ravaged landscape, once a battlefield of destruction, now seemed to breathe again, the faintest hint of renewal in the air. They stood side by side, exhausted but triumphant, their bond stronger than ever. The battle had been won, but the war, they knew, was far from over. There were other threats, other challenges, other battles to be fought, but they would face them together, mother and son, their hearts united, their powers intertwined, their love an unbreakable shield against the darkness that sought to consume them. The silence held a profound weight. It wasn't the emptiness of defeat, but the pregnant pause before the next act of their saga. The air hummed with the faintest resonance of residual magic, a silent testament to the power they had wielded. Kale looked at his mother, her face streaked with soot and sweat, her eyes reflecting the exhaustion but also the unwavering pride in his strength. Her hand, still gripping his, was a constant source of comfort, a silent reassurance of their unwavering bond. He knew that the path ahead remained uncertain. The prophecy still loomed, a constant reminder of the fate he might yet have to face. The Ember Court was fractured, but not destroyed, and the forces that sought to control him would not simply disappear. He knew that the fight for his soul, the fight for his identity, would continue long after the dust settled on this battlefield. But he also knew that he was not alone. He had his mother, her strength, and her wisdom, a guiding light in the darkness. He had Lyra, her unwavering support, a beacon in the storm. He had his own burgeoning power, a force that he was learning to control, to harness, to mold to his will. He had a life beyond the prophecy, a life that he would fight to protect, to shape, and to define. Looking at the devastation around him, the echoes of the battle still ringing in their ears, he realized that the true battle had just begun. It was a battle not just against the shadows and the forces of the netherworld, but a battle against destiny itself, a battle against the very fabric of his existence. He was no longer just the son of a seer. He was Kale, son of Merwin, and he would forge his own path, his own destiny, and he would do it with his mother by his side, their combined strength, a testament to a love that would conquer even the most formidable foes. The journey wouldn't be easy. It would be fraught with peril, with sacrifice, and with uncertain outcomes. But together, mother and son, they would face it head on. Their bond, their strongest weapon. Their combined might, their greatest shield. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, Kale felt a sense of hope, a conviction that despite the daunting path ahead, he and his mother would prevail. The future remained unwritten, but they would write it together. One page, one battle, one heart-stopping moment at a time. The silence that followed was not the peaceful quiet of a world restored, but a heavy, expectant stillness, pregnant with the echoes of the battle. The air, once thick with the stench of shadow magic and the acrid tang of burnt earth, now carried the faint, sweet scent of rain-washed soil, a fragile promise of renewal. The landscape, however, bore the scars of their conflict, charred with earth, fractured trees, and the lingering spectral shimmer where the shadows had once held sway. Even the air itself hummed with a faint residual energy, a palpable testament to the power they had unleashed. Merwin knelt, her hand resting lightly on the scorched earth. The protective spell she had woven around Kale still clung to him, a faint shimmering aura, but its brilliance was dimmed, the energy depleted by the ferocity of the battle. She felt the subtle tremor of the land beneath her, a testament to the seismic shift their actions had caused in the delicate balance between the mortal world and the netherworld. The veil, once thin, was now almost imperceptible, yet it still held. For now. Kale stood beside her, his own magic still shimmering beneath his skin, a restless ember that pulsed with a power both terrifying and exhilarating. He had felt the earth shudder, the very fabric of reality trembling beneath the onslaught of their combined might. He had seen the shadows dissolve, not merely defeated, but utterly eradicated from existence. Yet the victory felt hollow, a bittersweet triumph tinged with an unsettling sense of finality. The cost of their victory was immediately apparent. The very air they breathed was different, thinner, somehow altered. The trees, once vibrant and lush, were now skeletal, their leaves withered and brittle, their branches twisted and gnarled like the claws of a dying beast. The land itself felt wounded, its life force diminished, a reflection of the devastation wrought by the battle. This was not a simple battlefield. It was the very heart of the world, irrevocably changed. Merwin looked at her son, her face etched with exhaustion, but filled with the fierce pride of a warrior who had faced his destiny and prevailed. The boy she had hidden away for 17 years, the child she had protected at the cost of her own people, had become a force of nature, a conduit of the raw, untamed power of the Ember Court. He was not just her son. He was a symbol of hope, a beacon of defiance in a world teetering on the brink of collapse. But there was a shadow in her eyes, a deep and abiding fear that lingered even in the face of their victory. The prophecy still loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon, a constant reminder of the fate that could yet befall them. Cerithriel might be defeated, her army scattered, and the darkness that fueled her, the ancient malevolence that sought to consume Kale's soul, remained. It was a relentless army, relentless enemy, one that wouldn't surrender easily. As the first rays of dawn pierced the gloom, painting the ravaged landscape in shades of gray and crimson, they began to assess the full extent of the damage. The veil between the realms, weakened by the battle, was now unstable, allowing glimpses of the netherworld to bleed through. Strange, otherworldly flora sprouted from the earth, their luminescent blossoms casting an eerie glow upon the desolate landscape. The air was charged with an unnatural energy, a potent mixture of residual magic and corrupted fey essence, a palpable reminder of the forces they had confronted. The animals, once vibrant and teeming with life, were now weary and skittish, their eyes reflecting a primal fear. The birds sang a mournful song, a dirge of the world they had lost. The land itself seemed to mourn, the silent witness to a battle that had irrevocably altered its very essence. The victory was not a restoration, it was a transformation, a brutal metamorphosis that left the world scarred and changed, forever altered by the clash of worlds. Merwin knew that the aftermath would be long and arduous. The mortals, unaware of this battle, would soon discover the devastation, and the ensuing chaos could be catastrophic. The Ember Court, though defeated, would not remain silent. The whispers of dissent, the murmurs of rebellion, would soon escalate into a full-blown power struggle, potentially plunging both realms into deeper conflict. Their actions had not only changed the physical landscape, they had unleashed a wave of unforeseen consequences rippling through the fabric of reality. The emotional toll was even heavier. Kale, despite his victory, bore the weight of his newly awakened power, the potential for destruction that burned within him a constant threat. He was both powerful and vulnerable, a young man struggling to control the tempest within. Merwin saw the strain on her son, the toll of the battle that had taken on his spirit, the burden of his destiny weighing heavily on his young shoulders. She knew she had to help him not only control his power, but also find his place within this new scarred world. The victory had come at a cost, a heavy price paid in both lives and landscape. The land was wounded, and so were they. The world looked different. It felt different. There was a fragility to the air, a stillness in the shadows, a lingering sense of unease that hinted at the larger battle yet to come. The consequences of their actions would echo for generations to come, a legacy forged in fire and shadow, a testament to the power they wielded and the sacrifices they had made. Their triumph was bittersweet, a prelude to the even greater challenges that lay ahead. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril, and the fight for the fate of both realms was far from over. But together, mother and son, they would face the dawn, ready to confront whatever shadows awaited them. Their bond, tested in the crucible of battle, remained their greatest strength, a testament to the enduring power of love and sacrifice. The war was far from over, but for the moment, they could rest, knowing that they had averted a greater catastrophe, and that their fight, though scarred, had only just begun. The sun, a hesitant sliver of gold, finally breached the horizon, casting long skeletal shadows across the ravaged landscape. The air, still thick with the residual hum of magic, felt strangely cleansed, the oppressive weight of the battle finally lifting. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else. Something subtly floral, almost sweet, a fragrance utterly alien to this blighted land. It was a scent that hinted at a burgeoning life, a tentative whisper of renewal in the face of overwhelming destruction. Merwin traced the faint, ethereal lines of the protective spell still clinging to Kale's form. It was weakening, fading like a whispered promise. Its power depleted, but its presence remained, a fragile shield against the lingering echoes of the battle. She looked at her son, his face pale with exhaustion, his eyes mirroring the dawn's uncertain light. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that spoke of profound fatigue. Yet a spark of something else flickered in his gaze, a quiet resilience, a nascent strength born from the crucible of their harrowing ordeal. Kale shifted, his hand instinctively moving to touch the scar that bisected his arm, a stark reminder of the price he had paid. The burn pulsed with a faint warmth, a silent echo of the ember magic that thrummed beneath his skin, a power that was both terrifying and intoxicating. He had felt it surge through him, a torrent of raw energy that had nearly consumed him, but in the end he had controlled it, channeled its destructive force into a weapon of defiance. They walked slowly, their footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. broken only by the rustling of withered leaves and the distant, mournful cry of a bird. The landscape around them was a wasteland, a testament to the brutal conflict that had ravaged the land. Yet, even in this devastation, there was signs of life, tenacious and fragile. Strands of unusually vibrant green pushed their way through the scorched earth, defying the death that surrounded them. Strange, luminescent flowers, unlike anything either of them had seen before, unfurled their petals, their otherworldly glow illuminating the darkness. These were not the flora of either the mortal realm or the netherworld, but something entirely new, born from the clash of their worlds, a bizarre testament to the transformative power of their battle. The animals, creatures once vibrant and teeming with life, were cautious, their eyes wide with an apprehension that mirrored their own. A deer, its coat matted and thin, stared at them with a haunted look before disappearing into the undergrowth. Even the birds, their songs once joyous and plentiful, now sang a mournful dirge, a lament for the world they had lost. The air, though thinner, held a strange hum, a lingering energy from the battle, a potent mixture of fey magic and mortal resilience, intertwined and volatile. As they ventured deeper into the ravaged landscape, they stumbled upon a small, untouched grove of trees. These were not the twisted, gnarled remnants of the battle, but trees that stood tall and strong, their leaves vibrant and lush. A small stream flowed through the grove, its waters crystal clear, reflecting the pale light of the dawn. It was a sanctuary amidst the devastation, a pocket of untouched beauty in a world that had been irrevocably altered. The contrast was jarring, a sharp juxtaposition of destruction and rebirth. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of their world, of the delicate balance between life and death, between hope and despair. But it was also a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience of nature, to its capacity to heal and regenerate even in the face of utter devastation. As they rested by the stream, sharing a meager meal of dried berries and hardtack, Merowyn spoke, her voice low and weary. The prophecy, it still hangs over us, Kale. Cerithril's gone, but the darkness that fueled her, the ancient malevolence, it remains. Kale nodded, his gaze distant. He could still feel the power, the raw, untamed energy that pulsed beneath his skin, a constant reminder of the potential for both creation and destruction that dwelled within him. He was no longer just the boy his mother had hidden away, shielded from the dangers of the Ember Court. He was a warrior, a conduit for power far beyond his comprehension. But that power came with a heavy responsibility, a burden he was only beginning to understand. We must find a way to control this power, Mother, Kale said, his voice laced with a mixture of fear and determination. I do not want to become what they want me to be. I must forge my own path. Merowyn smiled, a weary but loving smile. You will, Kale. You are strong. You are resilient. You are your own master. Her words were a testament to her belief in her son, her unwavering faith in his ability to overcome the darkness that threatened to consume him. The sun climbed higher, its golden rays painting the landscape in hues of hope and despair. The air grew warmer, the breeze softer. The world, although scarred, seemed to be taking a tentative breath, a whisper of healing on the wind. The immediate threat had passed, but the long road to recovery lay ahead. The future remained uncertain, fraught with challenges that would test them to the very limits. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. The consequences of their actions would resonate for generations, rippling through the realms like the seismic tremors that had shattered the earth. Yet, in the quiet strength of their bond, in the shared glance of mutual understanding and unshakable love, they found the courage to face the dawn. The new era brought not only the devastation of a battle, but also the possibility of new alliances, new understandings, and a chance for a new world to emerge from the ashes of the old. The peace was fragile, the future uncertain. But as they stood hand in hand, gazing at the sun rising over the scarred landscape, there was a glimmer of hope, a silent promise that perhaps, just perhaps, a new dawn was breaking. The seeds of rebirth had been sown in the fertile soil of their sacrifice, and they would tend to them together. The fight for the fate of both realms had only just begun, but this time they would face it not as victims of destiny, but as masters of their own fate. Their journey was far from over, but the first step towards a new dawn had already been taken. The future was uncertain, and it was theirs to shape. The end.